Hello there, Black on Black Education family. We're back with another episode. And we never do one of these without a guest. And so we are super, super excited for you to let the people know who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Yes, my name is Natasha Bryant. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I have my own private practice, Speaklife Transformation. I provide mental wellness counseling and therapy. I also do confidence coaching, and I provide school-based trauma-informed coaching and consultation in K through 12 schools. Why do I do it? I absolutely love just giving back to our community, our Black and Brown community. And mainly because I just want to really help. Like initially when I first came in, like going from high school into college, like why am I picking social work? And my main drive was just to help our people just break that stereotype of either you're gonna die before you graduate, or you're gonna get pregnant before you graduate, or because you come from a certain place you only can take general courses, you could just go to a trade school, not a 4-year college, like all these different stigmas. And I felt like working in a school setting was my way of being able to like really tap in and helping just youth see their full potential, recognize that they can break generational cycles. Just because of what they've seen doesn't mean that that's what they have to become. And so that's really what has been my motivation, my drive from day one, and then even now to today.
Got it. Well, when we think about, first of all, can you tell people like what trauma-informed practice is, and why is it so important that educators kind of understand it and look through that lens when they're working with students in the classroom?
Yeah, so trauma-informed is when you are being you're taking approaches to understand more the why behind the behavior, right? Recognizing that Johnny's not just coming to the school angry because he wants to ruin your day, but there could be outside factors that are impacting his ability to learn, and really taking different strategies and approaches to really see the holistic approach, right? Like really seeing the holistic aspect of the student's life, and being able to consider that is their basic needs being met: food, clothing, and shelter, right? Have they gone through something in their life that could be impacting their abilities to learn? And so that's where the informed piece comes in, right? Like being informed, allowing yourself to take the time to really understand the individual's background, so then you can make the right steps and provide the right supports to be able to help the student to be able to get those needs met, so they can then be able to learn.
No, that's so important. Just as someone who walks in and out of a school building on a daily basis, I recognize how important trauma-informed practice is. And I also recognize how easy it is to operate in a way that's not trauma-informed, right? Because it's so easy to quickly get angry, or our egos don't always like the way that our students show up, right? And so it's so easy to flip back into other ways of being that don't serve our kids. And so a couple of weeks ago, I asked my students, like, what's overwhelming you? What is weighing on y'all right now? And I gave them time to write about it. And the things that I read, I had to talk about in therapy, because I wasn't prepared for all of the disclosures that I was going to get. But then it really made me recognize that, like, yes, it is very difficult to do my job, because we're not even going to talk about all that. But it's very difficult to do our jobs as teachers sometimes. And so you forget the why behind why you became an educator, and you forget to operate in that way. And so when we get those things and we give those opportunities, and we're wondering, why aren't students submitting their work? Why aren't students showing up the way that they should? Why aren't students doing this? Why are they acting out? Why are they sleep in class? And then you ask them, and they tell you, you have to change the way you operate. And and I think that's what it means to be trauma-informed. Not to say I'm there every day, because my students definitely know, like, oh, Miss Eva is not having it today. Don't play with her. I've heard them be like, Miss Eva is not with it. Just play them games, because when Miss Jean Charles come out, they don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I definitely understand that we have to give ourselves grace in the fact that we can't be the best version of ourselves as educators all the time. But I think that the more that we have that, like, am I being trauma informed idea kind of ringing in the back of our heads, the closer that we get. And so, what are the first things that you teach educators when you're completing a training or you're working with a group of educators or you're working with a school? Like, what are some of the first things that you're like, listen here, let's start here. How do those conversations go?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the two part. What do I tell them? And then how does it go? Yes, those are those are definitely two different phases. Often when I've heard your previous guests on your show also mention this too, and other educators and others in the field. One of the things that I'm often pushing or advocating for is relationship building. How does that go? Many times I get an eye roll. Like, here we go. And then another question about relationship building. Oh, I build relationship all the time with my students, right? But really, like, are they really building that rapport? Like, are they really engaging and getting to know their students, the neighborhood that they live in? Because some teachers aren't necessarily from the neighborhood, especially if you're working in urban communities. Many teachers don't even live in that neighborhood. And so there is a lot of disconnect of what's actually happening in the neighborhood, what their students are actually dealing with on a day to day. The teachers know like their route, route, and that's about it for many of what they know about the neighborhood. But so like really just that's one strategy I'm often giving is build rapport. And that is getting to know the students, even like the first 6 weeks of school, like really maximizing that time. Because most school years, that's where you're using to, you might be doing some recap from the previous school year. You might be just getting, going over the rules, the expectations, right? And that's a perfect time to do like different types of engagement and games and icebreakers, just different things like meet and greets, luncheons, after school meetings. Like there's so many different ways to build rapport. But many times teachers are overwhelmed. Let's be real. Like a lot of times teachers are overwhelmed with the demands that they have. And so the idea of meeting kids during lunch or meeting kids after school or et cetera is overwhelming for them. So the feedback I get often sometimes is like this this belief that it works for some. Some are just so discouraged by the amount of pressure they're getting in so many different areas or the behaviors that they're experiencing that they get really discouraged about any of the practices actually working. But that's one of the main ones I often recommend is building rapport. Because once the student knows you, they like and trust you, then they're more willing to do their best, at the best at their best ability. They're willing to like really they want to make you proud. They don't want to disappoint, right? So then they kind of go the extra mile to really engage because they feel like, okay, this person actually cares for me. So since they care for me and I can trust them, then I know they got my back, then I will do my best to try my best and to meet their expectations. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you say there, and what you got me to think about is how the trauma doesn't stop at the students. The teachers in the building,
Mm-hmm.
many of them are struggling and have their
Mm-hmm.
own challenges going on
Mm-hmm.
as well
Mm-hmm.
as administration.
Mm-hmm.
And I do wonder, like, how much does administration pay attention to their kind of trauma informed practices as it
Mm-hmm.
relates to how they interact with teachers, and what they ask of them, and so it becomes something more cultural for the whole building as
Yes.
opposed to just something that a teacher is supposed to do to the students. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. That is one of the things that I've noticed is the most important, to be honest. Many times, the administration will send their teachers to trainings or their counselor to training and do like a turnkey to their educators. But many times, administrators are not in trainings themselves, right? And so they end up having like a disconnect on um, the amount of work or the additional work that's needed for the trauma informed care, and so they don't end up providing their teachers with the time, the space to be able to do it, right? Actually, the one of the school I'm at right now is telling because the school counselor was asking me on some ways on how to like really get teachers engaged on like giving data and just tracking behavior so they can have a better referral process. And one of the advices I gave was, well, first, administration has to be on board. Like if administration is really advocating for it, providing the space, like if you're saying we're going to do a PBIS system and we want to give, we want to do this interventions and we want to engage kids through this positive behavior plan, right? Or interventions, but yet the feedback you give to teachers is you have X amount of time to get this agenda done. You have to make sure you are meeting these standards. And then teachers like, well, I want to do a party, right? One of the interventions I want is a PBIS party. But can I actually shorten my lesson because I'm going to need time to throw the party? And then administration is usually like, well, no, you need to be able to meet these standards by X amount of time. You got to teach these objectives by X amount of time. And then the teacher's like, so when am I supposed to do all this? You want me to run these, you want me to do these standards, you want me to also do these interventions, but yet you're not supporting me and utilize and giving me the space and opportunities to be able to do it. And so important for administration to really be on board and understand what it takes, because when they are advocating for it and it's coming down from the top, then the teachers end up buying into it. And then the teachers also get the support they need to be able to execute it as well.
And I think like to that point, right? If our administration isn't learning how to do these things, then how are they going to be trauma informed to us?
Yes.
Like, how are you going to be trauma informed to your educators? It is very difficult to be trauma informed for students when you haven't healed. And
Very
so
true,
you
yes.
have no space to do so, or you have no time to do so, or you're not given, or it's very clear in your school community that that's not a priority. It becomes difficult for the educator to do these things. And so when we have conversations about education, it really does come down to the educator level, which I do to some degree believe that it has to. Like what I'm doing in my classroom matters. And when the rapper talks about the teacher who told him he wasn't going to be nothing, like he remembers that. He doesn't remember the stress that the teacher was under. So the way that we make our kids feel is absolutely important. I will never push that out of the locus of my control. But we do need leadership from all the way, whether that is all the way at the top for the Department of Education nationally, all the way down to individual school leaders. There has to be a commitment to trauma informed practice on the school level.
Yes.
In order for it to happen for the students. So I definitely appreciate us bringing that in, and Dad, you looping in that part of the conversation, because I think that when we start to think about it on that step-by-step basis, we really start to think about like, how can we create the solution? But we can't create the solution if we just tell educators, y'all ain't being trauma informed, you messing up.
Yeah.
Like the system is not trauma informed. What is it that we can do to rectify that?
Yeah.
Teachers who are listening to this, right? Educators that are listening to this, school administrators that are listening to this, they have all dealt with the behaviors that come out of a student who's experiencing trauma and doesn't have an outlet for which to express that and to begin to heal from that with therapy and various other different practices. In the moment, like let's go to like the moment that it's happening. In class, the student cussing somebody out, cussing me out, or the student has completely withdrawn, not paying attention, hasn't submitted any work. Like we're very clear that something's going on. What was the first thing that you would advocate for me to do as a trauma-informed practitioner?
Yes. So one is, I mean, if they're doing, if they're engaging in any unsafe behavior, definitely, call climate or, dean department. But if they're, like you said, for example, withdrawn, and you notice like a change in their behavior, their head is down, or they're late to school often, or they're just really agitated. One is responding in a supportive way. What that looks and sounds like is where it's not a judgment where it's like, why is your head down? Or the rules in my classroom. We don't put our heads down in the classroom. Put your head up. If you need to get some water, go get some water, but you're not gonna have your head down in my class, right? That's a very like more on a direct way and a non-supportive way, and it's a way where the student's not getting the support they need. So then if the student's already agitated, that tone, right, that level of, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you got to get it together type of approach, then will escalate the student. So then you end up getting the cuss out, right? Or you get the walkout, or the student may walk out. But if you walk over to the student and you recognize that something's missing, like there's a need missing, and you come more in a supportive approach, right? And say, hey, I'm noticing your head's down. Are you okay? Do you need to get some water? Did you have breakfast this morning? Like more so like seeing what the need is and coming in with a supportive approach. Then the student has a better, then you're coming with your tone won't escalate, right? Your approach won't escalate. And then the students recognizing that you actually are coming to care and support them in their need. And two, you're able to learn and figure out, well, what is the problem? Why are they coming late to my class? Or why do they keep putting their head down? Or why are they just all of a sudden just not engaged and not working? And so, and some teachers think about it, they get nervous when they hear that type of approach, because like, I don't have time to do a whole conference, right? And it's like, no, it's not a conference. That time where you're walking around the classroom, right? That time where they're doing their independent work, that's a perfect time for you to intentionally stop at this person's desk, right? That's a perfect time to be intentional about, okay, I'm going to stop at this student's desk because I recognize that there's something going on, they're struggling. And then that could be a perfect time to spend 1 or 2 minutes, not a full conference. And if you feel like you need to talk more, to explore more, then say, hey, I'm noticing you're upset. I don't really have the time to talk right now, but would you like to meet with me during lunch? Or would you like to meet with me before you go over to your next period class? Or would you like to meet with me after school? And really let them create a space for you to be able to have that conversation when it's needed.
Yeah, and I mean, like almost everything else, it's an art and a science, and the art part starts with students actually feeling like this person in front of the room cares about me. And once once you've got on that side of the fence, that takes care of a lot of things. It doesn't mean it solves everything, but once you're on the side of the fence that you actually care, which seemingly, from what we hear when we talk to students, that there's a lot of teachers who do, but there's way too many teachers who, if they do, they're not showing it. The kids not feeling it, and chances are that they really don't. And I say that because people are intuitive. You who feels something for you and who doesn't. And so you can't fake it. And I don't know whether there's classes or whether it's just the people who don't bring that care just need to go and find a new profession. I'm not sure which one. And the unfortunate part is none of them are.
That's definitely what the new chancellor just said.
Well, I mean, and that's awesome, and I hope he sticks to it. And the sad part is none of those teachers are listening to the podcast. It's the ones that care who are listening to what you came to talk about. And so the ones who don't care, they're home watching TV, and ain't nothing wrong with watching TV, but that's they're not adding to their craft and figuring out how to deal with with children in these difficult times. So it's still going to be more difficult because the times are more difficult.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
I think that's what I would like to add. Sorry, Dad, but just before you went forward, what I would like to add there is that's where that piece about administration being trauma informed really does come in, right? Because if you're being trauma informed, you're starting to recognize that you have a teacher that none of the kids like, and they're murmuring, right? And you also recognize that, wait, hold on, I might need to give space for this. So yes, we have a meeting every Monday, but in that meeting, do I ever communicate to my staff these opportunities? Am I seeking them for them, right? So something that I say very, very often to my kids is, I can't expect y'all to do something that I'm not willing to do. So if I'm not willing to work after hours, I'm going to give you time during the class period to do the work.
Right.
If I'm not willing to go to administration and tell them how I feel about something, why should I expect that my students feel comfortable enough to come to me? and communicate with me, right? So I can't ask my students to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do. And I think that again, and the same needs to be true for administrations, right? Our administrations need to recognize that they have to be willing to do what it is that they're asking us to do. And if they're not, then maybe I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah. And ways I've done trainings and when administration is present is that I would, even though like the example might be in a teacher setting where it's like a teacher student relationship, I often make note that as administrators, the same exact skills I'm telling teachers to use with students, you can use with your teachers as administration. So as a supervisor-supervisee relationship, those same exact approaches. So like even just what I talked about with the supportive approach, instead of you looking at the teacher like, oh, they need classroom management, they're not doing their job. It's like actually ask them, what's going on? Do you need some support? You seem a little overwhelmed. I'm noticing that there's been some students having trouble in your classroom. What kind of support do you need at this time? So it's literally the same exact strategies that we're asking teachers to use for students, the administration can use with teachers.
The same thing that you might do for your brother or your daughter or your cousin. Like it's go ahead.
Sometimes people don't know how to do that for their daughter or their cousin, or they
That is
don't
true.
know.
That is true.
Don't know.
But it's also that and I don't know if there's well, this is what I love about like restorative practices and things to that effect, because I was going to say that, I cannot, and I went to school a long time ago, but I can't remember ever, sitting down and having any type of discussion about what's the best way to talk to people or things to that effect. I picked that up. Actually, I don't know how I picked it up, but I don't. But we expect people, to pick it up, and there's generally not a place, what I mean, where that happens. I guess, in kindergarten we share and things like that, but it's not built into how we're, how we're teaching students. So, I going back to what we were talking about before. So obviously students come to school, with these challenges. Teachers do as well. And then once they get in the building, there's challenges that arise as well. So talk a little bit about, how school might compound, what's going on in students and teachers' lives as well, because we don't brought them into conversation as well. So let's talk about both.
Yeah, no, it's so true. One school that I worked at, because I also worked, actually, I just recently stopped working in the schools. Now I'm doing it on a consultation basis, but I've worked in the schools as a school counselor, school social worker, mental health clinician, anything mental health, behavioral health related, I've done in the school setting. And so a school that I worked at, I would have a caseload and of students, and it was the beginning of the year. And I had to tell the principal, listen, I can't provide any therapy services right now because the climate. I need to help with the climate first, because the student can come to my office and I can teach them all these skills. But if they go back out my office and everybody's running around the building, how am I going to encourage him or her to stay in class if nobody's staying in class? They're like, Ms. Bryant, ain't nobody else in class, but I gotta be the one in class, right?
When in Rome.
And so it's like, so if the climate, if the culture of the environment or the climate is not a positive one within the school, it's going to be really hard to really shift students' behaviors. And then also what happens is, unfortunately, the student ends up getting blamed for it. So then it's the student is the problem. This student keeps running out of class, or this student, gets into fights, or this student doesn't follow any directions. But really, it's the climate that's not really supporting the student to practice positive behaviors. They're not learning emotional regulation, or they're not being supported. Like the educators, the staff is not really supporting that. They're more so yelling at the students, or because the staff's not even modeling emotional regulation, because as soon as they get upset, they're yelling. Or sometimes, let's be real, sometimes there's conflict within staff. And then they see that and they're like, kids talk about all the time. Yeah, did you see Miss such and such and Miss such and such cuss each other out? And so it's the climate. If the climate's not at a calm and positive state, then you're going to see escalation in behaviors. And unfortunately, many times the students get the blame for that as being the problem kid, when really it's the environment. It's not really supporting them in that growth of the regulation that this school wants to see and the positive behavior that they want to see.
I mean, you saw my face. Those of you who are listening and not watching, my face was telling it all, because I mean, it's facts. It's facts. I've had students come and be like, I heard such and such doing, and I was like, you heard what? Wait, what'd they say? Oh, oh my. Like, I'm getting tea about staff not liking staff from kids.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, something's happening here. Or I have students that are starting to recognize, how do I say this? I still work here. That are starting to recognize the hierarchy, and recognize that some people who are not a part of the top layer of the hierarchy, they feel they should be. Because they're recognizing that some decisions get made that impact students, that they see impact their teachers, and are like, no, I'm ready to fight. He said that you had to do that. Yeah, no, I'm ready to fight him. And I'm like, sir, you're not going to beat up your school administrator. Like, we're not going to do that. Let's sit down and have a loud conversation about how you're going to de-escalate yourself right now. But we have to, like, if I am bringing you into a toxic environment and expecting you to be a flower, like, I don't understand how we're expecting that. If I'm putting you in rotten soil and expecting you to flower, I don't know how we continue to expect that from students. And so, like, back to that whole idea of how can I expect you to do well in a space that I'm not doing well in? And if you're not doing well in, why aren't we reflecting and asking ourselves how we can do better, right? And so I'm the type of person who, I'm solutions oriented. I want to figure out, yes, I'm gonna talk about the problem, because you need to know what the problem is. And then I'm going to talk about how I think that we could address that problem, and how other people who I've communicated with believe that we can address that problem. And so, just like to your point, bringing in to the fold of this conversation, it's just so important for us to all watch our practices within a school building. And then again, even higher out into the way that we operate, or how laws and paths forward, and I'm not even gonna get into testing, like how all of these decisions get made for our kids, without taking into consideration what it is really like to be a kid in some of the environments that our students are growing up in. We can't expect that unless we've made the school such a safe haven for them, where when they come in, they immediately feel more safe and more comfortable. If they're still on their guard the way that they're on their guard outside of our building, then there's work that we have to do. And a lot of the work that you do is beginning to create more and more school spaces. So that is just a kudos, gratitude, and thank you for the work that you do, because from school to school, like, this sort of thing has to happen. And so how have you dealt with the stigma that I'm sure teachers that you have worked with have, that students that you have worked with have, around mental health counseling and support? What are the things that you the seeds that you plant to support students in really taking ownership over what's the word that I'm trying to use, over their mental health, and finding healthy outlets for the struggles that they might be having in that area?
Well, one is normalizing it, right? So one is giving them the space to actually talk about the stress that they're going through, and then helping them to understand why they can feel in that stress, or so normalizing it in a way that they understand. So if they are, just constantly appearing upset or appearing angry, or maybe acting out in a way, and that's just what I do, right? That's just how I handle my frustration or anger. And just asking them, really, like, giving them the space, like, I notice that you're angry a lot, or you appear angry a lot. Like, what's going on? And they're like, yeah, and they'll go into the situation, and then going into helping them understand that must be a lot for you. Are you stressed? Like, do you feel stressed often? And then they'll go into that, and then really just normalizing just their experience, where the stigma is taken off of it, and just like, it makes sense. Like, that whole, like, it just makes sense why you feel the way you feel. Right. And how are you dealing with that? Like, what do you do to deal with the stress? And then giving them, they'll usually give me, a strategy, or they might say, I don't even know. I just kind of just wake up and I just go. And then teaching them some strategies on how to, that's more helpful, and showing them that, talking, because sometimes the kids don't get referred. Well, most kids, they get referred because they have to, like disciplinary reasons or whatever. And they're very up at first, because within our community, you don't talk to people about your business, right? And so they'll enter my office with a guard up, and they're like, I'm fine, or very small talk, and just allowing them to understand that, you're here because of these reasons. Tell me more about what's going on, and then helping them recognize, well, do you want, is that something that you want to work on? Do you want to continue to feel this way, or do you want to you want to change what you're experiencing? Most kids will always say yes. And then I say, well, guess what? You can come here to me. We'll just chit chat, have a talk. I can teach you some skills on how to handle it, and a lot of ways of how I compare it. I said, your math teacher, they teach you how to, depending on the grade, they'll teach you math skills like algebra, or they'll teach you, division. Or what my job is to teach you how to manage your emotions, so you can be able to make decisions in a helpful or unhelpful, in a helpful way, be able to manage your stress. So I use that to compare to help them understand. So really just providing that like psychoeducation, but opening the door by normalizing what they're going through, and then providing the psychoeducation on how they actually can change. Because many kids just think, well, this is how I do it. This is how I see everybody else handle anger, so this is normal. But helping them recognize that that doesn't have to be the way. You can actually change how you feel and how you're approaching situations.
Yeah, I mean, I love everything you said there, and just I was talking to a young person recently, and they were talking about like that's just how I am, and they were making these declarative, definitive, like, yo, you're 16, you know what I'm saying? Like that's how you are today, but do you recognize that's not how you have to be tomorrow? And I fear that some people feel like the way that they are at 16 is the way that they're going to be, for the rest of their lives. And so I'm curious about, well, one, it's I want to hear your strategies, but before that, I have to, say that schools are not providing enough resources for this.
No.
Only one person.
Yeah.
There's a counselor who, that person that got the conversation that you just described, they probably need to talk again next week and follow up on it, because it's, I have all kind of stuff that's going on in my life that that have been challenges for a long time. And sit down with somebody. And sitting down with one person one time to discuss it, it's not a fix. So help me understand some of the strategies, or maybe like resources you can point them into, so that it becomes a journey as opposed to just a single conversation.
Yeah. And you talk about for the teen or the youth?
For the youth, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so one strategy that I offer, well, in those settings, I provide the therapy. So the strategy I will offer in those moments, I would offer them to join the counseling. But I also make it very clear to them. So even if I was referring out, but I also make it very clear that, counseling is something that only works if you want it. And so one thing about youth is that they want to feel in control, right? And when you give them choices, they feel like they'll be more willing to be like, okay, I'll try it out. But if you make them do it, the rebellion within them comes out. And so even if they're referred by a teacher or even their parent, I always give that option of, this is what is an opportunity for you where you can have this space where it's going to be judge free. I make it very clear that it's a safe space. I make it very clear that you don't have to tell me your whole life story the first time. We'll meet probably a few times before you can, before you indulge, if you want to take that time to do that. And then I'll ask them. I said, so how? And then I'll ask them if they wanted, what areas they want to change, and I'll talk to them about how therapy or the counseling can help them with that. And then I'll ask them if this is something you want to do. So how does this sound? Does it sound like you want to meet again? Does it sound like you want to schedule a session where we meet on a weekly basis? And most of the time they say yes. And sometimes they're like, no, I'm good. I don't want to do it. Sometimes it's the older boys that will give that response. But then I'll say, well, you know what? I'll let them know the space is always open to them. If I see them in the hallway, I'll check in with them. How are you doing? just to build a rapport on that end. So I might not be able to build a rapport on a regular basis in my office, but if I see them in a hallway, I'll always say hi. I always check in. How are you? Letting them know, like, if you ever need to talk, you know where my office is. And so, like, again, just helping them to feel safe to be able to have that space to be able to have the conversation. Another resource is that I will give them strategies on just like some quick like regulation strategies they can use like in the classroom. So if it's a one-time conversation, I will in that moment we'll just talk about like how you can handle this problem. So they're coming to me about a problem. All right, so what are some strategies you can use in this place where that can help you solve this problem? So if it's like talking to an adult, if it's asking to take a break, if it's one, identifying an adult, like who in this building do you feel safe to talk to see if they have someone, and then making sure they check in with that adult. Like, okay, well, if this is somebody you trust, then that's someone you can go to have the conversation with. Taking the break, so taking advantage of like a bathroom break or a water break, like asking to do that so they can remove themselves from the situation if there's a problem in the classroom with them or another student. And then also, I mean, each state is different, but I know in the state of Pennsylvania at 14, they have more rights as a youth to be able to regulate their services. So they become the identified client. So they don't necessarily need parent permission when it comes to any type of medical services. And so at the age of 14, they can seek therapy if they want therapy, or they can deny if they want to. And so for the kids that are older, if they want the resources, then I'll let them know, places where they can get some counseling if they want the counseling. But those are some strategies, especially if it's like that one conversation and I'm not able to meet with them on a regular basis.
And something you were talking about when you were like those quick moments in the bathroom or see them in the hallway, reaching out. I think I told this story on the podcast before when I had a teacher who thought I was troubled. And so she had me go to the school counselor, which felt like a punishment. And I don't know what possessed me to do, but I just threw my whole life on there. I was like, this happened to me, this happened to me, this was going on in my house, like my life is this, like just went off. And she never talked to me again. Like ever. Never talked to me. I've never, I don't even remember what this lady looked like. But I remember telling her all this stuff that I now know if a child told me this, I would be like, okay, come on. We need to go talk. I don't know who we need to go talk to.
Right.
And I never spoke to her again. Never got called into the office again. Never, nothing. And so for you to say that a student denied service and you still go and do the work. Unfortunately, there are kids who were crying for help or who have cried for help and it hasn't been answered. And so I think that that's another thing that we have to take into consideration. I asked my students one day, what are your thoughts on therapy? And that was our check-in question. And we all just talked about it. And 4 out of the 20 students in the class said, I'm never going to therapy again. They told me they wouldn't tell my mom. And right after the conversation, they told my mom. And so we're not only trying to dismantle a stigma, we're also trying to undo what other people who are not putting trauma-informed practice first, what they have done to marginalize folks from the services that they should have been able to use to support them at that time. Right. And so that just makes me, because we're crazily rounding this thing up, but it makes me think about what's your call to action? After somebody listens to this podcast, when they get to this point, 39 minutes and 12 seconds, when they get to this point of the episode, what is the call to action after they round it out, after they finish up listening to this? What is it that you want them to do? If not tonight, if it's not after work hours, if they're on their way to work, what should they do today to just show their students that they're trauma informed without obviously using that language?
This is one step that's very simple. It doesn't require a whole lot of work, and it starts before you leave the house. Don't take it personal. That's the biggest. If you're talking about strategy or skill, is just don't take it personal, right? Like and what I mean by before doing that before you leave the house. like recognizing that you might have that student that gets on your last nerve, you know, and so you might have to do your self-care so that you can show up full as your full self when you arrive, so that you don't take it personal, because it's gonna be really hard not to take it personal if you have your own issues causing your tolerance window to be smaller, right? If we're working on a 0 to 10 scale, 10 being, you know, I have I'm at a high level of anger, anxiety, depression, etc., and then 0 being I'm calm, cool, collective, right? And if you're arriving at the school at a 5, right, your tolerance window has now decreased. You know, you don't have much to fit in, and so one student, maybe 2, can easily cause you to jump to like a 7, 8, and then you're not going to respond in a way where you're not going to take it personal. But when you don't take it personal, then you're able to then recognize, okay, what you're able to have those conversations with the student. You're able to recognize, you're able to say, you know, you sound really upset right now. Like, even if they're cussing you out, you sound really upset right now. Are you okay? You know, is everything okay? Like, I see that you're upset right now. I see that you need something from me. Once you calm down, or, you know, I'm going to give you a minute to, you know, to get yourself together, and I'm going to come back to you in 1 minute. And when I come back to you in 1 minute, I want you to tell me what's wrong, right?
Yeah.
Even in those moments, or the person, like we were just giving, the person's heads down, they barely engage. Where you don't take it personal, where they're like, they don't like your class, or they're just trying to be disruptive, or they just want to sleep all day. Don't take it personal. Just recognize that there's a need, right? Every action has a reason. Every action has a purpose. And so every single student's action or response is giving you a message. It's telling you something. And so when you don't take it personal, you're able to be more empathetic, and you're able to step out your own issues and really kind of step into their world to figure out what's going on and how can I help this student.
Yeah.
I mean, don't take it personal is such fantastic advice. I mean, I think, you know, well, Eva would say that I am, you know, completely abnormal, you know, when it comes to that particular. But I just recognize that, you know, it's people's stuff is their stuff. Like, you know, most of the time when somebody says something to you, does something to you, it's a reflection of them, not a reflection of me. And so I don't go, you know, to a night, and I won't say I never do, but you know what I mean? It's rare that, you know, that I'm going to snap at a, you know, at a thing. And then that just leads to less conflict, you know, like it's less conflict. And I think, you know, there's probably sometimes where people want that conflict. It's like, I want all the smoke, you know what I'm saying? And if you give it to them, then what'd you say?
I say that all the time to my kids. I'd be like, I want the static. These hands work for kids too. Like, get it.
Well, I mean,
Like,
if you give it to them, then another day, there's another kid who wants it, and they can see that they can get a rise out of you. And then now all of a sudden,
it's a fake rise. Let's be real.
I know for you that you're just joking, but I think there's other people who get the rise, and then another kid's like, okay,
oh yeah,
yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like later on in the year, that's going to be me. I can't wait for my turn. Like, yeah,
I watch that happen. I watch it happen.
Same.
I watch it happen all the time.
It.
And I have kids who come to me and be like, you know what I said to someone? And they laugh because they know that they knew they was going to get that. And they were like, and I had a plan. I was plotting. I don't like this class. I don't like this teacher. So I'm going to get her tight in the beginning. She's going to cuss me out. She's going to spend the whole period trying to kick me out and call, da-da-da. And now we didn't have to learn. And I'm sitting here like, crack the code, didn't you?
Yeah.
Dang.
But even then, the trauma,
not smart.
Yeah. And then the trauma-informed piece would say, okay, so why don't you like the class, right? What was the motivator behind how you want to work so hard to stop everybody from learning, right? Is it because the work was hard and you didn't want to look stupid, right? Or you didn't want to, you know, ask questions or seem like you don't know the information? Or did this teacher say something to you one day that's still sticking with you? Teacher has no idea that it hurt your feelings or it caused you to feel less than. And so now this is your way of kind of getting the person back, because you're like, you don't respect me, you don't care about me, so I'm not gonna care about you. Like, what's the why behind all that? And that's where that trauma informed comes in. So when you don't take it personal, you're able to have the energy and the tolerance to be able to ask those questions or allow yourself to be able to step in that space to do that.
I love that, because that was me. That was definitely me. I had a teacher ask me, she saw me at the pool. She asked me whether the 2 children I was babysitting were mine. I was 16. 2 2. I had 2 kids.
And they were like kids of age. It wasn't babies. Like,
And I lit her class up. Lit her class up. Like, and I got great grades too. So it was like worse on top of worse for her. Like she just couldn't take it. And I was like, this is fun.
So Natasha, before we get out of here, do us a favor. Well, do everybody a favor. Let people know how to get in touch with you. Let people know how they can engage with you.
Yes. So I have a website, speaklifetransformation.com. And on there, you can learn more about me and my practice and the services that I provide. I'm also on Instagram at speaklife_SLT and Facebook at Living Speak Life. And I also have a YouTube channel, Speak Life Transformation. So on my YouTube channel, there are tons of videos on just tips and strategies on just how to deal with anything that involves with wellness, self-care, you name it. It's a great resource for those areas.
So that's the call to action, get to the website, bring her into your school community. Like if these are the challenges that are going on, then have a consultation, because it's each and every person that's a part of the school community. Like we could each take responsibility for to do our part. And so if you know, okay, maybe this is a part of the solution, take responsibility and say, hey, I'm going to bring this to the powers that be. So I think that's super duper important.
Yes,
I know I will be.
So the last thing we always do is we allow our interviewee to become the interviewer. So if you have any questions for us, please do let us know.
Yeah, I think my question is thinking back to, as we were talking about just like strategies or approaches when it comes to supporting the students, what would you say is like one, if you've in your own experience, that one approach or strategy that you use that you found just really helped you like connect with the student in a situation and really changed your relationship with the student in a positive way? Like maybe there was some conflict at first and then you tried this approach or strategy and then it totally did a 360 to the point where it ended up changing how you interacted and how your student showed up in your class.
Yeah. I mean, so as the teacher in the building, I guess I have this question. But I talk to my students like I talk to my friends. Minus the curses. I got to potty now. But I talk to my students like I talk to my friends. And the reason why I think that is a practice that has helped me stay as trauma informed as I can when I am still healing. It has helped because I look at them and I treat them the way I would treat my friends because I speak to them that way. Right. So the same way that I wouldn't curse out one of my friends, I'm not going to curse out one of my kids. The same way that I wouldn't do like my attitude thing that happens. And my dad is really the person in the world that gets that, like, because I wouldn't do that to my friends. And so although there are people in my life that still get it, there are categories of people who I recognize that our relationship requires that I operate in a certain way. And so because I feel beholden to my students to operate in a certain way, that has really helped. And so I'm thinking of a very particular student who I hope is doing fantastic in college right now. And she tried to get the other kids not to like me. Like she was like, we don't like new people. Day one was like, oh no, you don't need to know my name. You'll figure it out. Like just attitude on attitude on attitude. Called me a BICTH, like in front of everybody. Like Pat, I'm sitting here like, I don't know if I could do this. Like, and one day I came into a classroom. She was in the classroom by myself, and I'm like, this is your opportunity. As I sat down next to her, I was like, oh, what do you want to do? What do you do after school? Just talking. At the end of that conversation, oh, Miss Eva, what you doing? Oh, Miss Eva, like the homie, right? And although she didn't do the work in my class until the day before the semester was over, listen, she did it. Showed up, and I knew what she wanted to do, and I believed in her. And when she got her acceptance letters, I was one of the first people that she told, and it was so crazy to see how in the one conversation changed the entire trajectory of our relationship. And so when other people were talking in class and she was there, shut up, like, and I was like, you don't yell at them, like you don't. But it was out of listen, you ain't gonna mess with my teacher. That's how the relationship went from being called the BICTH in front of the whole class and trying to get other people not to like me, came to like, this is my warrior and my advocate, and someone who I still talk to, who no longer goes to the school that I teach at. And so I think that just shows that when you have students that you don't know, we just don't know what's going on. We don't know. And the more that we get to know that child, we get to know what's going on. And the more we treat them like people. So maybe you're not the kind of teacher that wants to treat, you want to have stronger boundaries than I do. I'm okay with where my boundaries are at. Like, I like when my kids text me and they're like, hey, miss, you look real cute today. I'd be like, yes, miss, thank you. Like, I like interacting with them in that way, but not all educators will, and that's okay. But I think that if we come down to being able to talk to them like people, and I think that is where the change happens. And so that's definitely the practice that I use. And I know that I still have a whole lot more to learn and pick up and add to my toolkit, but that's the one. I treat them like my friends.
Awesome.
And I'll quickly add, as somebody who's not in the classroom but does have an opportunity to hang with kids, I'll take it right back to the beginning of the conversation. They know I care. You know, by the questions I ask them that maybe nobody has asked them before, and the way that I ask it, and the way I lean in and look at them and really, really pay attention. It's, the number of times that somebody gets excited talking about something that, like school. Yeah, I can get kids excited to talk about school. And it's just because, like, nobody ever asked me that before. So yeah, I care about what they have to say, and they can feel that. And so I think that anybody can do it.
That's important, because a lot of people don't care what they have to say. They don't, genuinely. They come into the building every day and they're like, I don't want to talk to them. And although I feel that way on some occasions, because the amount of social interaction that educators have to do on a daily basis is not easy, and your social meter can plummet very, very quickly. It is extraordinarily important to think about, do I care what my students are going to say? Do I care what they're going to bring to me that it has nothing to do with academics?
Right.
And if you don't, you need to find a new profession. Like, if everything that the student says you expect for that person, for it to be connected to your content area, you need to leave. You need to become a college professor who just talks for hours and then walks away. Because the expectation to I'm just delivering knowledge to you. That's what it looks like in a lecture hall. When you're a teacher in a K through 12 classroom, and your job is to develop students, you have to care about what they say. Because we don't know that anybody else in their life does.
That's why those lunch breaks or dates or those after school meetings are so important. And even if the students come to you for after school tutoring, or they're meeting with you during lunch for academic support, you can still use that time to just ask them about something non-academic related. While you're going over this assignment, you can still say, like, what are you doing over this weekend? Or what do you do when you're not in school? Or even tell them. Sometimes teachers are nervous to reveal who they are outside of the school, but the kids want to know. The kids want to know, who are you outside of the school? And so allowing yourself just to be open to your students in that way as well.
It's a universal principle. Like, there's genuineness. It's universal. Like, you feel that stuff. So thank you. I genuinely want to say that we have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Yes, same.
We appreciate you coming on, and we appreciate your time. And we really see opportunity to be able to work together towards our shared goals of creating a future of education.
Yes, I really enjoyed my time here. Thank you for having me.
All right, y'all. That was another episode of the Black on Black Education Podcast. Have a wonderful rest of y'all day.